In the shadowed halls of Greystone Manor, a scream pierces the autumn night. Sir Reginald Ashford is dead, his body crumpled in the rose garden, a bloodied stone beside him. Who lured the wealthy diplomat to his doom with a cryptic note? Was it his daughter Eleanor, hiding a secret love? Her ambitious fiancé Lawrence Cavendish, driven by greed? Or the nervous Beatrice Harwood, whose brother's crimes teeter on exposure? As lies unravel and clues mount, a lost cufflink, a scuffed path, a hidden will, Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective, steps into a web of betrayal. Can his little gray cells untangle the truth before the killer strikes again? Dive into this gripping tale of deception, where every glance hides a motive, and the shocking reveal will leave you questioning everyone. Chapter 1. The Gathering at Greystone Manor. The late autumn sun cast a golden haze over Greystone Manor, a sprawling Elizabethan estate nestled in the heart of the Sussex Downs. Its ivy-clad walls and mullioned windows gleamed with an air of timeless dignity, though the chill in the air hinted at secrets lurking beneath its grandeur. The manor belonged to Sir Reginald Ashford, a retired diplomat whose wealth and influence had drawn an eclectic circle of guests for a weekend retreat. To an outsider, the gathering promised nothing more than fine wine, spirited conversation, and the clink of crystal in the drawing room. But to those who knew the undercurrents of human nature, the air was thick with unspoken tensions. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, stood at the edge of the gravel drive, adjusting his scarf against the evening breeze. He had been invited at the last moment, a courtesy extended through Sir Reginald's acquaintance with his late father. Hastings, whose military bearing and earnest demeanor had not faded with the years, felt a curious unease as he surveyed the arriving guests. There was something in the way they greeted one another, polite smiles that did not reach the eyes, hands clasped a fraction too long or too briefly, that suggested more than a casual reunion. The guest list was a study in contrasts. Sir Reginald himself, a widower of 60, moved with the measured grace of a man accustomed to command. His silver hair and sharp laughter rang out too often, as if to drown out some private sorrow. Mr. Victor Harwood, a stockbroker with a penchant for flashy cufflinks, arrived with his sister, Miss Beatrice Harwood, a quiet, mousy woman who seemed perpetually startled by her own shadow. Rounding out the party was Lady Margaret Dunley, an aristocratic widow whose sharp tongue and impeccable pearls made her both admired and feared. As the guests assembled in the oak-paneled drawing room, Hastings noted the time: 6:45 p.m., October 12, 1925. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the portraits of Ashford ancestors. Sir Reginald raised a glass of sherry, his voice warm but edged with formality. "To old friends and new beginnings," he toasted, his eyes lingering on Eleanor, who stood beside Cavendish. The room echoed his sentiment, but Hastings caught a fleeting glance between Clara Langston and Victor Harwood, a look that spoke of shared secrets or mutual distrust. Dinner was announced at precisely 7 p.m., and the party moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier. The meal was exquisite: roast pheasant, glazed vegetables, and a claret that Sir Reginald boasted was from his private cellar. Conversation flowed, though Hastings sensed an undercurrent of restraint. Eleanor spoke little, her fingers twisting the stem of her wineglass. Cavendish, seated beside her, dominated the discussion with tales of his legal triumphs, his voice carrying a note of self-satisfaction that grated on Hastings. Dr. Langston, meanwhile, watched the room with the intensity of a scientist studying a specimen, while his wife's laughter grew shriller with each course. It was during the dessert course, at precisely 8:37 p.m., that the first ripple of unease broke the surface. A footman entered, his face pale, and whispered urgently to Sir Reginald. The host's expression tightened, though he waved the servant away with a forced smile. "A minor matter," he assured the table, but Hastings noted the way his hand trembled as he reached for his glass. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked on, its rhythm a quiet count. Wife retired early, citing fatigue, though Clara's flushed cheeks suggested something other than exhaustion. Victor Harwood, meanwhile, slipped out to the terrace, lighting a cigarette with a hand that seemed steadier than it should have been. Hastings, left alone for a moment, glanced at the grandfather clock in the hall. It was 9:47 p.m. when he heard it. A sharp, muffled cry from the direction of Sir Reginald's study, followed by the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. He froze, his heart quickening. The cry had been brief, almost swallowed by the silence of the manor, but it was enough to set his nerves on edge. He moved toward the study, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor, only to find the door ajar. Inside, the room was dark, save for the faint glow of a desk lamp. Papers were scattered across the floor, and a glass decanter lay in shards by the fireplace. Sir Reginald was nowhere to be seen. Hastings stepped back, his mind racing. He was no detective, but he knew one man who could unravel the mystery of that cry and the empty study. Tomorrow, he would send for Hercule Poirot. For now, he could only hope that the night would pass without further incident. But as he returned to the drawing room, where the remaining guests sat in uneasy silence, he felt the weight of Greystone Manor pressing down upon them all. A house that, as Beatrice Harwood had said, seemed to watch and wait. Chapter 2. The Vanishing of Sir Reginald. The atmosphere in Greystone Manor had shifted irrevocably by the time the grandfather clock in the hall struck 10. The muffled cry and the sound of shattering glass had sent a shiver through the guests, though none admitted to hearing it as clearly as Captain Hastings. The drawing room, where the party had reconvened, was now a stage of forced civility, with polite murmurs barely masking the unease that hung like a fog. Hastings, standing by the fireplace, observed the group with a growing sense of disquiet. The absence of Sir Reginald, their host, was a void that no amount of small talk, his voice steady but firm. The question hung in the air, met with a chorus of shaken heads and murmured denials. Eleanor's eyes flickered with something, fear perhaps, or guilt, but she said nothing. Cavendish cleared his throat. "He mentioned papers to review," he said, his tone clipped. "Likely detained by some business matter." "Business at this hour?" Lady Margaret's voice cut through the room, her arched eyebrow conveying skepticism. "Sir Reginald is a man of habit. He does not vanish without a word." Her words, though softly spoken, carried the weight of accusation, and the room grew quieter still. Hastings recounted the cry and the shattered decanter he had found in the study, omitting no detail. The guests exchanged glances, some uneasy, others calculating. Dr. Langston suggested with clinical detachment that Sir Reginald might have suffered a medical episode, a fainting spell perhaps, or a fall. "We should search the house," he added, his tone suggesting it was a formality rather than a necessity. Clara, however, clutched her husband's arm, her voice a whisper. "What if something dreadful has happened?" The search was organized with reluctant efficiency. Cavendish took charge, assigning pairs to cover different parts of the manor. He and Eleanor would check the upstairs rooms, Dr. Langston and Clara the ground floor, Victor and Beatrice the gardens and outbuildings, while Lady Margaret insisted on accompanying Hastings to the study. "Someone must ensure no detail is overlooked," she said, her tone implying that Hastings alone might miss something critical. The study, when they reached it at 10:23 p.m., was as Hastings had left it. Papers strewn across the floor, the broken decanter glinting in the lamplight, and Sir Reginald's chair pushed back as if he had risen in haste. Lady Margaret's eyes swept the room with the precision of a hawk. "This was no accident," she murmured, pointing to a small brass paperweight that lay near the hearth, its edge smeared with a dark, sticky substance. Hastings knelt to examine it, his stomach turning as he recognized the unmistakable hue of blood. "Do not touch it," Lady Margaret cautioned, her voice low. "It may tell a story we cannot yet read." Garden. Victor stood over a crumpled figure lying face down in the dew-soaked grass. It was Sir Reginald, his silver hair matted with blood, a deep wound at the base of his skull. Beatrice, clinging to her brother's arm, let out a choked sob, while Clara turned away, her hand pressed to her mouth. Dr. Langston knelt beside the body, his fingers probing with clinical precision. "He's dead," he announced after a moment, his voice flat. "Blunt force trauma, likely instantaneous. This happened within the last hour." The time, Hastings noted, aligned with the cry he had heard at 9:47 p.m. Cavendish, his face pale, demanded, "Who was with him last? Someone must know something." His eyes lingered on Eleanor, who stood frozen, her gaze fixed on her father's body. No one spoke. The silence was broken only by the rustle of leaves in the night breeze. Lady Margaret, her voice steady, suggested they return to the house and telephone the police. "And no one," she added, her eyes narrowing, "is to leave this manor until we have answers." As the group retreated, Hastings lingered, his eyes scanning the scene. The rose garden was bordered by a low hedge, with a gravel path leading to the terrace. Footprints, indistinct in the damp grass, trailed toward the house, but they were too muddled to identify. A glint of metal caught his attention near the hedge, a small cufflink, engraved with the initials VH. He slipped it into his pocket, his mind already turning to the one man who could make sense of this chaos. The police would come, of course, but Hastings knew they would blunder through the evidence, chasing obvious leads and missing the subtle truths. Only Hercule Poirot, with his meticulous mind and unerring instinct for human nature, could unravel the mystery of Sir Reginald's death. As the clock struck 11, Hastings resolved to send a telegram at first light. For now, he could only watch the guests, their faces a gallery of grief, fear, and secrets, and wonder which among them had struck the fatal blow. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Hercule Poirot. The morning of October figure immaculate in a tailored overcoat, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the damp. His mustache, waxed to perfection, framed a face that radiated calm authority. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, swept over the manor, taking in every detail: the ivy, the mullioned windows, the faint air of disquiet. "Mon ami Hastings," he greeted, his voice precise and lightly accented. "You have summoned Poirot to a most intriguing affair. A murder, you say, in this fine English house? Bien. Let us see what the little grey cells can uncover." Hastings, relieved by Poirot's presence, recounted the events of the previous evening. The cry at 9:47 p.m., the shattered decanter, the blood-smeared paperweight, the scrawled note, and Sir Reginald's body in the rose garden. He produced the cufflink marked VH from his pocket, handing it to Poirot, who examined it with a delicate touch, his lips pursed. "A clue, Hastings, but one that speaks softly," he murmured, We must listen to its whisper, not its shout. Poirot insisted on inspecting the scene of the crime first. The rose garden, now trampled by police boots, yielded little at first glance. But Poirot moved with methodical precision, his cane tapping the ground as he studied the grass, the hedge, and the gravel path. He paused at the spot where Sir Reginald had been found, his eyes narrowing. The body was here, oui? Face down, with a wound to the skull. And yet, the grass, it is not crushed as one would expect from a struggle. He crouched, his gloved fingers brushing the earth. And these footprints, so muddled. They tell a story, but not the one the police assume. Returning to the study, Poirot examined the desk, the scattered papers, and the broken decanter. The blood-smeared paperweight drew his particular attention. This, he said, holding it up to the light, was not the murder weapon. The blood is too sparse, too carefully placed. A distraction, perhaps. He turned to the note Hastings had found, reading it aloud. Must speak to... Langston and Clara occupied opposite ends of a sofa, their distance speaking volumes. Victor Harwood leaned against the wall, his expression guarded, while Beatrice fidgeted beside him. Lady Margaret Dunley, seated regally in an armchair, watched Poirot with a mixture of amusement and wariness. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice smooth and commanding. A tragedy has occurred. Sir Reginald Ashford, a man of distinction, lies dead, and one among you knows more than they have admitted. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover the truth, not through force, but through the exercise of the little grey cells. I ask for your cooperation and your honesty. His eyes swept the room, lingering on each face as if reading their thoughts. He began with simple questions, establishing the timeline. All claimed to have been in the drawing room or nearby at 9:47 p.m. when Hastings heard the cry. Eleanor confirmed she had remained by the fire, Cavendish at her side. Dr. Langston and Clara said they had retired to their room but were still unpacking. Victor admitted to smoking on the terrace, while Beatrice claims to have been in the library, fetching a book. Lady Margaret had been reading in the drawing room, her presence corroborated by Hastings. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. And Sir Reginald? Who saw him last? A heavy silence followed. Eleanor spoke at last, her voice trembling. I saw him at dinner, but he left for his study afterward. He seemed preoccupied, Cavendish added quickly. He mentioned papers. Nothing unusual. Poirot's gaze lingered on Eleanor. Mademoiselle, your father wrote of a truth that could not stay buried. What did he mean? Eleanor's eyes widened, and she shook her head. I don't know. He never spoke of anything like that to me. Poirot's smile was gentle but probing. Perhaps, mademoiselle, the truth is not what you know, but what you fear. The room grew still, the weight of his words settling over them like dust. As the gathering dispersed, Poirot drew Hastings aside. Mon ami, this is a house of secrets. Each guest hides something. Love, hate, reeling from the morning's revelations, had been summoned once more. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame commanding attention with the quiet authority of a conductor before an orchestra. His hands, clasped behind his back, betrayed no impatience, but his green eyes darted from face to face, noting every flicker of unease. Captain Hastings, seated near the window, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and anticipation, knowing that Poirot's questions would cut through the polite veneer of the gathering like a scalpel. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice precise and measured. The death of Sir Reginald Ashford is no accident, no sudden misfortune. It is murder, deliberate and calculated. To find the truth, I must understand the man and those who surrounded him. Each of you will speak with me, privately, and we shall see what the little grey cells uncover." His tone was polite, but there was a steel beneath it that brooked no refusal. Inspector Grayson, who lingered by the door, muttered something about foreign theatrics, but Poirot ignored him, gesturing for Eleanor Ashford to join him in the library for the first interview. The others dispersed, their murmurs trailing like smoke, while Hastings remained, jotting notes in his pocketbook. He could sense the tension in the air, as if the manor itself were holding its breath. In the library, Poirot seated himself behind a mahogany desk, motioning for Eleanor to take the chair opposite. Her face was pale, her dark eyes shadowed with grief, but there was a defiance in her posture that intrigued Poirot. "Mademoiselle Ashford," he began, "your father was a man of influence, yet he wrote of a truth that could not stay buried. What troubled him in his final hours?" Eleanor's fingers tightened around her handkerchief. "I don't know," she said, her voice low. "He was distant lately, but he never confided in me. Father was private, always." Poirot tilted his head, his moustache twitching slightly. "Private, oui, but not indifferent. The note mentioned E. You are certain he spoke of nothing troubling? Nothing about your engagement, perhaps, to Monsieur Cavendish?" Eleanor's cheeks flushed. "Discussed business, his investments, my career. He trusted me." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Trust, monsieur, is a fragile thing." We shall see Dr. Felix Langston entered next, his gaunt frame seeming to absorb the room's light. Poirot's questions were sharp, probing the doctor's whereabouts and his relationship with Sir Reginald. "We were acquaintances," Langston said coolly. "He consulted me once about headaches, but I found nothing amiss." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And your wife, Madame Langston, she seemed distressed last night. Why?" Langston's jaw tightened. "Clara is emotional." The atmosphere of the evening unsettled her. Poirot made a mental note of the doctor's evasiveness, dismissing him with a polite nod. Clara Langston, when questioned, was a study in contrasts to her husband. Her hands fluttered as she spoke, her words tumbling out in a nervous rush. "I was unpacking at 9:47, I swear it. Felix was with me. We heard nothing." Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. "Madame, you laughed much at dinner, yet later you were pale. What changed?" Clara's eyes darted to the door. "It was just the manner. It felt wrong. I can't explain it." Poirot observed the tremor in her hands, filing it away for later. Victor Harwood was next, his stockbroker's swagger tempered by the weight of suspicion. Poirot held up the cufflink marked V.H. "This, monsieur, was found near the body." "Yours, I presume?" Harwood's face reddened. "I lost it earlier in the day, on the terrace, I think. Someone must have moved it." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Moved it? A curious assumption. And your business with Sir Reginald?" Harwood shrugged. "We talked investments." He was cautious, but nothing more. Poirot noted the man's quick glance toward the window as if seeking escape. Beatrice Harwood, timid and trembling, offered little beyond confirmation of her library visit. "I was looking for a book," she whispered. "I didn't see Sir Reginald after dinner." Poirot's gentle probing revealed nothing further, though her nervous fidgeting rehearsed. And yet, there is a crack. Eleanor's fear, Cavendish's defensiveness, Harwood's cufflink, Clara's nerves. We must find the contradiction that breaks the facade. He tapped the desk where the note still lay. "This truth Sir Reginald spoke of, it is the key. But whose truth? And why did it cost him his life?" As the afternoon waned, Poirot requested the household staff be questioned next, suspecting they might hold pieces of the puzzle the guests would not reveal. Hastings, watching his friend's methodical mind at work, felt a familiar thrill. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot was already weaving the threads of Greystone Manor's secrets into a tapestry only he could fully see. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The clock in Greystone Manor's hall struck 5 p.m. on October 13th, 1925, its chimes echoing through the tense silence that had settled over the house. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the gathering gloom of the late afternoon, had turned his attention to the household staff, believing their unassuming presence might reveal what the guests concealed. Captain Hastings, ever at his side, marveled at Poirot's ability to remain unruffled amidst the mounting suspicion that clung to the manor like damp mist. Yet, as the interviews with the staff concluded, a new development shifted the investigation, casting a shadow of doubt over one suspect in particular. Poirot had questioned the butler, Mr. Simmons, a stooped man of 60 with a deferential air, and Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, whose stern demeanor softened only when speaking of Sir Reginald's kindness. The footman, Thomas, a nervous youth of 19, confirmed he had delivered a message to Sir Reginald at 9:30 p.m., urging him to meet someone in the rose garden. "It was a note, sir," Thomas stammered under Poirot's piercing gaze, "left on the hall table. No signature. I didn't read it, I swear," Poirot pressed for details. But Thomas could only recall the note's hurried scrawl and the instruction to deliver it discreetly. The revelation of the obvious. They are red herrings, meant to distract from the true path. To test his suspicions, Poirot requested a private word with Victor Harwood in the conservatory at 6:15 p.m. Harwood, his usual swagger diminished, entered with a scowl. "I didn't write any note," he insisted, his voice sharp. "Yes, I lost my cufflink, but I told you, it was on the terrace earlier. Someone's framing me." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he leaned forward. "Monsieur Harwood, you spoke with Sir Reginald about investments. Were they profitable?" Harwood hesitated, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "Not lately. He was pulling funds, said he needed liquidity. I advised against it, but he wouldn't listen." Poirot noted the man's unease, filing it away without comment. As Harwood left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "The inspector believes Monsieur Harwood is our man, but I suspect otherwise. The cufflink was dropped, perhaps, but not by accident. And the note, why leave it unsigned? The killer wishes to point us toward Harwood while hiding their own hand." Hastings frowned. "But who would frame him? And why?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "That, mon ami, is what we shall discover." The evening brought further tension as the guests dined together, their appetites subdued by the weight of suspicion. Eleanor Ashford barely touched her food, her eyes darting to Cavendish, who spoke loudly of Harwood's dubious financial dealings, as if to cement the stockbroker's guilt. Clara Langston, unusually subdued, picked at her plate, while her husband, Dr. Langston, observed the table with clinical detachment. Beatrice Harwood, seated beside her brother, whispered urgently to him, her face pale. Lady Margaret Dunley, ever composed, remarked dryly, "It's a pity suspicion falls so easily on the obvious." After dinner, Poirot requested a map of the manor's grounds from Mrs. Hargreaves, studying it intently by lamplight. The rose garden, he noted, was accessible not only from the terrace, but also via a side path leading to the stables. a path less visible from the house window. Yet no one saw Harwood move toward the garden. Curious, no? The reenactment yielded little, but Poirot's sharp eyes caught a detail: a faint scuff mark on the gravel path near the stables, overlooked by the police. It suggested a shoe with a worn heel, distinct from the muddled footprints in the grass. "Another thread," Poirot said softly, "but one that does not yet fit the pattern." As the group returned to the house, Inspector Grayson announced his intent to detain Harwood for questioning in town, convinced of his guilt. Poirot did not protest, but his expression was one of quiet dissatisfaction. "Hastings," he said as they stood alone in the hall, "the inspector moves too quickly. The red herrings have done their work, but Poirot is not so easily swayed. We must look to the others: Eleanor's silence, Cavendish's protectiveness, the Langstons' distance. Someone has woven this web, and we shall find them." By 9 p.m., as the manor settled into an uneasy quiet, Poirot retired to his room, his mind alight with possibilities. Hastings, watching his friend's measured steps, knew that the little Belgian was already piecing together the contradictions, sifting through the distractions to uncover the truth hidden beneath Greystone Manor's polished surface. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The morning of October 14th, 1925, brought a faint drizzle to Greystone Manor, the patter of rain against the windows adding a mournful cadence to the already sombre atmosphere. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the weather or the previous evening's distractions, sat in the library, a cup of tisane steaming beside him. His notebook lay open, filled with meticulous jottings, times, alibis, and observations, each a thread in the intricate tapestry he was weaving. Captain Hastings, ever faithful, stood by the window, watching the grey clouds roll over the Sussex Downs, his mind turning over the mounting clues and the shadow cast over Victor Harwood. Poirot's attention, however, was fixed on a single detail that had emerged during his sleepless night of reflection: the scuff mark on the gravel path near the stables, noted during the previous evening's reenactment. It was— "And yet, it is not near the rose garden where Sir Reginald was found. Why here, so close to the stables?" Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, ventured a guess. Could the killer have fled this way after the murder? It's less visible from the house. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Possible, mon ami, but consider. The body was found at 10 p.m., minutes after the cry, at 9:47 p.m. The killer had little time to stage the scene with the cufflink and return to the house unnoticed. This mark, it suggests another movement, perhaps before or after the crime." Returning to the manor, Poirot requested the shoes of every guest and staff member, a task that raised eyebrows but was carried out under Inspector Grayson's reluctant supervision. The shoes were laid out in the library, a curious parade of polished leather and worn soles. Poirot examined each pair with the precision of a jeweler, noting their condition. Most were pristine, befitting the manor's elegance, but one pair stood out, a set of men's brogues belonging to Dr. Felix Langston, their heels worn unevenly, with a faint trace of gravel embedded in the leather. "Dr. Langston," Poirot mused, holding the shoes aloft. "You claimed to be upstairs with your wife at 9:47 p.m. Yet your shoes, they tell a different story. This gravel, it matches the path by the stables." Langston, summoned to the library, maintained his composure, though a muscle twitched in his jaw. "I walked the grounds earlier in the day," he said coolly. "The gravel must have lodged then." Poirot's smile was polite but probing. "Perhaps, monsieur. But the little grey cells, they are curious. We shall see." The discovery shifted Poirot's focus, though he did not dismiss Victor Harwood entirely. The cufflink and the note remained troubling, their placement too deliberate to be mere chance. To test his suspicions, Poirot requested a second look at Sir Reginald's study, accompanied by Hastings and Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper. At 11:30 a.m., they combed the room once more. Poirot's eyes darting from the desk to the broken decanter, to the blood-smeared paperweight. It was then that he noticed a discrepancy. A single sheet of paper, tucked beneath the blotter. Perhaps retrieving or planting something. He made a mental note to compare it against their belongings, though he knew such evidence required careful handling. The fingerprint, he told Hastings, is another clue, but it must be understood in context. We are building a mosaic, piece by piece. By noon, Poirot's inquiries had stirred unease among the guests. Eleanor, in particular, seemed shaken, her eyes red-rimmed as she avoided Cavendish's protective gaze. During a brief encounter in the hall, Poirot asked her about her father's habits. "Did he often write notes in haste, mademoiselle?" Eleanor hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes, when he was troubled, he'd scribble thoughts and lock them away." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And where did he keep such notes?" Eleanor pointed to a small safe behind a portrait. "There, but only he knew the combination." The safe, when opened by Mrs. Hargreaves under Poirot's supervision, contained financial records and a single letter, addressed to Eleanor but unopened. Its contents were cryptic. "My dearest, forgive me. The burden I carry is too great. Speak to L if I cannot." The L intrigued Poirot. Lawrence Cavendish? Or perhaps Langston? He tucked the letter away, his mind racing. As the drizzle continued outside, Poirot and Hastings retreated to the library, where Poirot sketched a timeline on a sheet of paper. 9:30 p.m. Note delivered. 9:47 p.m. Cry heard. 10 p.m. Body found. The scuff mark, the fingerprint, the letter, they were fragments, but they pointed to a truth Poirot was beginning to glimpse. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "the killer is clever, but not infallible. They have left traces, small but significant. We must follow them, step by step, until the picture is complete." Chapter 7. More lies surface. The drizzle had thickened into a steady rain by the afternoon of October 14th, 1925, casting Greystone Manor in a dreary pallor that mirrored the growing unease among its inhabitants. Hercule Poirot, seated in the library with his notebook open, was piecing together the fragment. Doubts leaned against the wall, his expression defiant. His sister Beatrice fidgeted nervously, while Lady Margaret Dunley surveyed the room with her usual air of detached amusement. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the tension, "the truth of Sir Reginald's death lies not in what you say, but in what you conceal. Secrets, affairs, debts, grudges have a way of surfacing, like bubbles in a still pond. Today, Poirot will stir the waters." His words hung in the air, and Hastings noted the way several guests shifted uncomfortably. Poirot turned first to the letter found in the safe, holding it aloft. "This, addressed to Mademoiselle Eleanor, speaks of a burden and mentions L. Who is this L? And what burden did Sir Reginald carry?" Eleanor's eyes widened, but she shook her head. "I don't know. He never gave me such a letter," Cavendish interjected, his voice sharp. "If it's me you're implying, I had no secrets with Sir Reginald. Our dealings were open. Business, nothing more." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And yet, monsieur, business can hide many things." The room grew restless as Poirot shifted his focus to Dr. Langston. "Monsieur, your shoes bear gravel from the stable path, yet you claim to have been upstairs at 9:47 p.m. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Langston's face remained impassive. "As I said, I walked the grounds earlier." The gravel must have stuck Clara, however, flushed, her hands twisting in her lap. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. "Madame, you were most distressed after dinner. Was it merely the atmosphere, or something more personal?" Clara's eyes darted to her husband, then away. "It was nothing," she said, her voice barely audible. "Just nerves." But Poirot's keen observation caught the fleeting glance she cast toward Victor Harwood, a look that spoke of more than casual acquaintance. Hastings, too, noticed it, his mind racing to connect the dots. The breakthrough came unexpectedly at 3:15 p.m., when Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, approached Poirot with a trembling hand. "Sir, I found something in the laundry," she whispered, producing a fold. "Think," she sobbed. I saw him that night, in the study, before dinner. He was upset, talking about debts, about someone betraying him. I tried to comfort him, and he cut his hand on the decanter. I wiped it with my handkerchief, that's all." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you did not mention this before?" "Why, madame?" Clara's voice broke. "Because I was afraid. Felix, my husband, he's so jealous. If he knew I was alone with Sir Reginald, even for a moment." She trailed off, tears streaming down her face. Poirot's expression softened, but his mind was sharp. "And after this meeting, what did you do?" Clara hesitated. "I went to my room. Felix was there. We stayed until the cry was heard." The revelation of Clara's encounter with Sir Reginald added a new layer to the mystery, but Poirot sensed it was only a partial truth. Her fear of her husband's jealousy hinted at deeper tensions, perhaps an affair or a misunderstanding that had spiraled out of control. He filed away her confession, turning his attention to another inconsistency, the financial records from Sir Reginald's safe, which he had reviewed earlier that morning. The records, examined at 11 a.m., revealed that Sir Reginald had been liquidating assets at an alarming rate, withdrawing large sums from investments managed by Victor Harwood. A ledger entry dated October 10th noted a payment to an unnamed party, marked only as L. Poirot's mind returned to the letter. Could L be Langston, or was it Cavendish, as Eleanor's fiancé? The financial strains suggested a motive, perhaps blackmail, or a desperate attempt to protect a secret. At 4:30 p.m., Poirot spoke with Beatrice Harwood, whose timidity had begun to seem more calculated than genuine. "Mademoiselle," he asked, "your brother Victor, was he troubled by Sir Reginald's financial decisions?" Beatrice's eyes flickered with panic. "Victor was upset, yes. Sir Reginald wanted to pull his investments. It would have ruined Victor's reputation." Her voice trembled, and Poirot pressed gently. "And you, mademoiselle, what did you see in the library that night?" Beatrice hesitated, then whispered, "I saw someone pass by the window, heading the soft glow of lamps, casting long shadows across the shelves of leather-bound books." Captain Hastings, standing near the door, felt the weight of the past 2 days pressing upon him. The tangled web of clues, Clara's blood-stained handkerchief, the scuff mark by the stables, Sir Reginald's cryptic letter, growing ever more complex. Poirot, however, seemed invigorated, his green eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. "Mon ami," he said, tapping his notebook, "we approach a turning point. The truth begins to stir, and someone will break under its weight." At 7 p.m., the guests gathered for dinner, their faces drawn and their conversations stilted. The absence of Sir Reginald's commanding presence was palpable, and the specter of suspicion hung over the table like a storm cloud. Eleanor Ashford, seated beside Lawrence Cavendish, barely touched her food, her eyes distant and haunted. Cavendish, ever attentive, spoke in low tones, his hand resting possessively on hers. Dr. Felix Langston and Clara sat apart, their silence a chasm that spoke of unspoken grievances. Victor Harwood, still under Inspector Grayson's scrutiny, maintained a defiant air, while his sister Beatrice seemed on the verge of collapse, her hands trembling as she lifted her glass. Lady Margaret Dunley, observing all with her sharp gaze, broke the silence with a pointed remark. "It's curious, isn't it, how grief reveals the cracks in one's composure." Poirot, who had joined the dinner at Hastings' insistence, watched the interplay with quiet intensity. He noted the way Clara avoided her husband's glance, the way Victor's fingers tightened around his fork when Cavendish mentioned Sir Reginald's finances, and the way Eleanor's shoulders stiffened at the mention of her father. After the meal, at 8:15 p.m., Poirot requested a private word with Eleanor in the conservatory, sensing her fragility might yield the breakthrough he sought. The conservatory, filled with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids, was a stark contrast to the manor's heavy atmosphere. Eleanor stood by a glass pane, her silhouette framed against the darkening sky. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm.
Listen. And now?
She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Poirot's expression remained calm, but his mind was racing. And this confrontation, mademoiselle, did it happen? Eleanor shook her head. I don't know. After dinner he went to his study. I stayed in the drawing room. I never saw him again. Poirot noted the time of her account, before dinner, likely around 7:30 p.m., when Clara had also met Sir Reginald. Merci, mademoiselle, he said softly. Your honesty brings us closer to the truth. The revelation shifted the investigation's focus. Poirot summoned Cavendish to the library at 8:45 p.m., his demeanor deceptively mild. Monsieur, Mademoiselle Eleanor says her father distrusted your dealings. What can you tell Poirot of this? Cavendish's face darkened, his voice sharp. Nonsense! Sir Reginald and I discussed investments, nothing more. He was cautious, yes, but there was no rift. Poirot's eyes narrowed, and yet he wrote of a burden, of a truth involving Elle. You are certain there was no confrontation? Cavendish's jaw tightened. None. I was with Eleanor all evening. Poirot dismissed him, but the lie was evident in the barrister's too-quick denial. Hastings, who had overheard, whispered, Do you think Cavendish is hiding something, Poirot? The detective nodded. Oui, mon ami. He hides much. But whether it is murder or merely shame, we shall see. The emotional turning point came at 9:30 p.m., when Clara Langston, unable to bear the strain, sought Poirot in the library. Her face was ashen, her voice trembling. I lied, she confessed, her words spilling out like a dam breaking. I didn't just see Sir Reginald before dinner. I saw him again, after dinner, in the study. He was frantic, talking about betrayal, about someone close to him. He said he'd been a fool to trust someone. I don't know who. I left him there, alive at 9:40 p.m. I swear I didn't hurt him. More push to bring it into focus. By 10 p.m., as the manor settled into an uneasy quiet, Poirot began to plan his next move, a gathering where he would apply pressure, forcing the truth to surface. The emotional weight of Clara's and Eleanor's confessions had shifted the balance, and Poirot knew the killer was growing restless, their carefully woven lies beginning to fray. Chapter 9. The Trap. The evening of October 14th, 1925, cast a heavy gloom over Greystone Manor, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and unspoken accusations. Hercule Poirot, ever the master of timing, sensed that the moment had come to tighten the net around the killer. The confessions of Eleanor Ashford and Clara Langston had cracked the facade of civility, revealing fissures of fear, jealousy, and betrayal. Now, at 8 p.m., Poirot gathered the guests in the drawing room, his small figure commanding the space with an air of quiet authority. Captain Hastings, standing near the fireplace, felt a familiar thrill. This was Poirot at his most formidable, setting a trap with the precision of a watchmaker. The room was a tableau of tension. Eleanor sat pale and silent, her hands clasped tightly, while Lawrence Cavendish hovered beside her, his eyes wary. Dr. Felix Langston and Clara occupied opposite ends of a sofa, their distance a silent testament to their strained marriage. Victor Harwood, still smarting from Inspector Grayson's suspicions, leaned against the wall, his expression a mix of defiance and unease. Beatrice Harwood, her brother's shadow, clutched her shawl, her eyes darting nervously. Lady Margaret Dunley, seated regally in an armchair, watched with a faint smile, as if anticipating a performance. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. "The murder of Sir Reginald Ashford is a crime of calculation, woven with lies and half-truths. But the truth, it cannot hide forever. Tonight, Poirot will lay bare the contradictions, and the killer will feel the weight of their own deceit." His words sent a ripple through the room, and Hastings noted the subtle shifts. Clara's trembling hands, Cavendish's tightened jaw, Beatrice's sharp intake of breath. Poirot began with the timeline, his tone methodical. At 9:30 p.m., a note was delivered to Sir Reginald, luring him to the rose garden. At 9:47 p.m., a cry was heard, and by 10 p.m., his body was found, struck by a fatal blow. The cufflink marked VH suggests Monsieur Harwood, but it is too convenient, no? Control? The financial records show Sir Reginald withdrawing funds, perhaps to protect his daughter from a dangerous alliance. Poirot's gaze shifted to Dr. Langston. "And you, monsieur, with your gravel-stained shoes, why were you near the stables? Was it to meet Sir Reginald, or to cover your tracks?" Langston's face remained impassive, but his voice was cold. "I told you, I walked the grounds earlier. You have no proof otherwise." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Proof, monsieur, is in the details. And the details, they speak loudly." To heighten the pressure, Poirot produced the letter from Sir Reginald's safe, reading aloud, "My dearest, forgive me. The burden I carry is too great. Speak to L, if I cannot." He paused, letting the words linger. Who is this L? Lawrence? Langston? Or another? And what burden drove Sir Reginald to his death? The room grew deathly silent, each guest avoiding the other's eyes. Hastings, watching closely, saw Beatrice's hands tremble violently, her face pale as chalk. Poirot's voice softened, but his words were sharp. Someone in this room knows the truth. Someone wrote the note that lured Sir Reginald to his death. Someone struck him, staged the scene, and planted the cufflink. And someone, perhaps, fears exposure more than they fear justice. He stepped forward, his eyes locking onto each guest in turn. Speak now, or the little grey cells will speak for you. The trap had its effect. Beatrice Harwood, unable to bear the mounting pressure, let out a choked sob and rose to her feet. "I can't stand it any more," she cried, her voice breaking. "I saw something that night. I lied about the library. I was near the study, looking for Victor. I saw Clara leaving the study, just before the cry. She looked terrified, and her hands were shaking. I didn't say anything because I was afraid for her." Clara's face drained of colour, and she shook her head frantically. "No! I told you! I left him alive! I swear it!" Felix Langston's eyes blazed as he turned to his wife. "Clara, what is this? You were with him." Currents beneath the surface. The killer is close, and they grow nervous. Tomorrow we shall gather them again, and the final piece will fall into place. Hastings, catching the glint in Poirot's eye, knew that the little Belgian was poised to unravel the mystery, his trap tightening around the one who had dared to defy the order of justice. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The morning of October 15th, 1925, broke with a pale sun piercing the mist over Greystone Manor, as if nature itself anticipated the unveiling of truth. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his dark suit and polished shoes, stood in the drawing room at 10 a.m., his presence commanding the attention of the assembled guests. The air was thick with expectation, each face a mask of apprehension or defiance. Captain Hastings, positioned near the window, felt his pulse quicken, knowing that Poirot's meticulous mind had woven the threads of the mystery into a tapestry ready to be revealed. The stage was set for the final act. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant. The murder of Sir Reginald Ashford was no act of impulse, but a carefully orchestrated crime, born of betrayal and concealed by deception. Today, Poirot will lay bare the truth, step by step, using the little gray cells to expose the killer among you. His green eyes swept the room, lingering on Eleanor Ashford's pale face, Lawrence Cavendish's tense jaw, Dr. Felix Langston's impassive stare, Clara Langston's trembling hands, Victor Harwood's defiant posture, Beatrice Harwood's nervous fidgeting, and Lady Margaret Dunley's arched eyebrow. Poirot began with the timeline, his tone methodical. At 9:30 p.m. on October 12th, a note was delivered to Sir Reginald, luring him to the rose garden. At 9:47 p.m., a cry was heard, and by 10 p.m., his body was found, struck by a blunt instrument. The cufflink marked VH pointed to Monsieur Harwood, but it was too obvious, a red herring. The scuff mark by the stables, made by a worn heel, suggested Dr. Langston, yet he claimed to be upstairs. The
Someone in the hall as you left, moving toward the terrace. This was no servant, but the killer, who had just written the note luring Sir Reginald to his death. Poirot turned to the scuff mark. The mark by the stables, made by a worn heel, was not Dr. Langston's, though his shoes were similar. It was a deliberate misdirection, created by someone who knew the doctor's habits and had access to similar shoes. The fingerprint on the paper in the study, small and delicate, was not Madame Langston's, nor Mademoiselle Eleanor's, but Mademoiselle Beatrice Harwood's. Beatrice gasped, her hands flying to her face. Poirot's voice was relentless. Mademoiselle, you lied about the library. You were near the study, planting the note to lure Sir Reginald. You saw Madame Langston leave, and you seized your moment. But why? Because Sir Reginald had uncovered your brother's financial misdeeds. Victor Harwood had been siphoning funds from Sir Reginald's investments, a fact revealed in the ledger entries marked L for loss. Sir Reginald threatened to expose him, ruining your family's reputation. Victor Harwood lunged forward, his voice hoarse. That's a lie! I never! Poirot raised a hand. Silence, monsieur. Your sister acted to protect you. She wrote the note, luring Sir Reginald to the garden, where she struck him with a stone from the hedge, a weapon easily discarded. She planted your cufflink to shift suspicion, knowing it would be seen as too obvious. The scuff mark was her error. She wore your old shoes, Victor, to mimic Dr. Langston's, hoping to confuse the trail. Beatrice's sobs filled the room, her voice breaking. I had to. He was going to destroy Victor, destroy us. I didn't mean to kill him, only to stop him. The confession hung in the air, a shattering admission. Eleanor buried her face in her hands, while Cavendish's arm tightened around her. Clara clung to Felix, who remained rigid, his eyes cold. Lady Margaret's lips curved in a faint, approving smile. Poirot continued, his tone softer but firm. The but order is restored. The killer is unmasked, and justice will follow. Hastings nodded, marveling at his friend's genius, as the weight of Greystone Manor's secrets lifted at last. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The sun hung low over Greystone Manor on the afternoon of October 15th, 1925, casting a golden glow across the Sussex Downs that belied the somber mood within. The revelation of Beatrice Harwood's guilt had left the household in a state of quiet shock, the weight of her confession settling like dust after a storm. Hercule Poirot, his task complete, stood in the library, his small figure framed against the shelves of ancient books. His green eyes, sharp and contemplative, gazed out at the rose garden where Sir Reginald Ashford had met his end. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood nearby, his notebook closed, his mind still reeling from the morning's dramatic unmasking. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but resonant. "The affair of Greystone Manor is concluded, yet it leaves behind a lesson, as all such tragedies do. The human heart, it is a labyrinth, full of shadows and secrets. But with order and method, even the darkest paths can be illuminated." He turned from the window, his mustache twitching slightly as he adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture that signaled his return to calm precision. Hastings, leaning against the desk, ventured a question. "Poirot, how did you know it was Beatrice?" The cufflink, the scuff mark, they pointed to so many others. Poirot's smile was gentle, almost indulgent. "Ah, Hastings, you see the clues, but you do not see their meaning. The cufflink was too obvious, a beacon to mislead. The scuff mark by the stables, it was not Dr. Langston's, though his shoes were similar. It was Beatrice, wearing her brother's old shoes to create confusion, a desperate act to protect Victor. The fingerprint on the paper in the study, small, delicate, it was hers, left when she planted the note. And her fear, her trembling, it was the fear of one who had acted out of love, not hatred." Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping the floor.
Eleanor's lips trembled, but she nodded. "And Lawrence? Was he involved?" Poirot's gaze softened. "No, mademoiselle. His secrets were of ambition, not murder. But you must decide if such ambition is worthy of your heart." As Eleanor left, Hastings reflected on the other guests. Clara Langston, shaken by her own confessions, had reconciled with her husband, though their marriage remained fragile. Dr. Langston, cleared of suspicion, had retreated into his usual reserve. Victor Harwood, devastated by his sister's sacrifice, faced his own reckoning for his financial misdeeds. Lady Margaret Dunley, ever observant, had offered Poirot a rare nod of respect before retiring to her room, her sharp tongue silenced by the weight of the truth. Poirot gathered his notes and prepared to depart, his work at Greystone Manor complete. "Hastings," he said, as they stepped into the hall, "the world is full of such dramas: love, greed, loyalty, betrayal. But Poirot, he brings order to the chaos. The little grey cells, they do not fail." He paused by the grandfather clock, its hands marking 3:30 p.m., and adjusted his hat. "Come, mon ami. The train to London awaits, and there are other mysteries to unravel." As they stepped onto the gravel drive, the Daimler waiting to carry them away, Hastings glanced back at the manor. Its ivy-clad walls seemed less imposing now, the secrets within laid bare. Poirot, sensing his friend's mood, offered a final thought. "Do not mourn too long, Hastings. The manor will heal, as all things do when truth and justice prevail." With that, he climbed into the car, his mind already turning to the next challenge, leaving Greystone Manor to its quiet recovery under the autumn sun. Chapter 12. The Echoes of Truth. The late afternoon of October 15th, 1925, bathed Greystone Manor in a soft amber light, as if the sun sought to soothe the wounds left by the recent tragedy.
Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings had not yet departed, detained by a final request from Eleanor Ashford to review a newly discovered document found among her.
Poirot read aloud, his voice clear. My dearest Eleanor, if you read this, I am gone. The truth I have uncovered threatens us all. Victor Harwood has betrayed my trust, siphoning funds to cover his debts. But there is more. A shadow behind him, someone I once trusted. Speak to Langston if I cannot. Forgive me for the burden I leave you. Your loving father. The letter confirmed Poirot's deductions, but introduced a new mystery. The shadow behind Victor. Hastings leaned forward. Langston again, but he's been cleared, hasn't he? Poirot's moustache twitched. Oui, mon ami. But this shadow, it suggests a deeper conspiracy. Dr. Langston was not the killer, but perhaps he knows more than he has revealed. Poirot's mind raced, revisiting the clues, the scuff mark, the blood-stained handkerchief, Beatrice's confession. The letter hinted at a larger scheme, one that Beatrice's desperate act had only partially concealed. Poirot requested Dr. Langston's presence in the library at 4:30 p.m. The doctor entered, his gaunt face impassive, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Monsieur, Poirot began, holding up the letter, Sir Reginald named you as one to trust. He spoke of a shadow behind Victor Harwood. What do you know of this? Langston's jaw tightened, and for a moment silence hung heavy. Then, with a sigh, he spoke. Sir Reginald came to me a week ago, suspecting Victor of embezzlement. He asked me to verify certain financial documents, as I had once advised him on investments. I found evidence of fraud, but there was another name, a silent partner in Victor's dealings. I didn't know who, only that they were close to Sir Reginald. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you did not share this with Poirot? Why, monsieur? Langston's voice was low. I feared implicating myself. My own investments with Victor had soured, and I didn't want to be seen as complicit. Poirot nodded, his mind. Secure the estate. Cavendish bristled. That's preposterous. I loved Eleanor, not her father's wealth. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent. Poirot's gaze softened, but his words were precise. Monsieur Cavendish, your ambition was no secret. Sir Reginald's letter suggests he feared your influence over Eleanor, perhaps suspecting you as the shadow behind Victor's schemes. But Poirot believes otherwise. The true shadow was one who stood to gain by silence, one who knew of Victor's crimes, but did nothing, until Sir Reginald threatened to expose them. The room grew still as Poirot's eyes settled on Clara Langston. Madame, you met Sir Reginald twice that night. You knew of Victor's embezzlement, did you not? Your husband's investments were tied to Victor's, and you feared exposure would ruin you both. Clara's face crumpled, and she nodded, her voice a whisper. I begged Sir Reginald to stay quiet, for Felix's sake. I didn't know Beatrice would. I didn't know. Poirot's voice was gentle but firm. You are not the killer, madame, but your silence enabled tragedy. The little grey cells have seen the truth, and it is complete. He turned to Hastings. Mon ami, the case is closed, but the echoes of truth linger. Greed and fear wove this web, and Beatrice's love for her brother was its tragic thread. As the guests dispersed, Poirot prepared to leave Greystone Manor, his work done. The letter, The final clue had clarified the motives, though it could not undo the pain. At 6 p.m., as he and Hastings stepped onto the gravel drive, the Daimler waiting, Poirot offered a final reflection. Hastings, the human soul seeks to protect what it loves, but in doing so, it may destroy. Order is restored, but at a cost. With that, he entered the car, leaving the manor to heal in the fading light. Chapter 13. The Unseen Motive. The evening of October 15th, 1925, descended upon Greystone Manor with a quiet that felt more like a pause than a resolution. The revelation, "Ami," he said to Hastings. "The little grey cells, they are restless. The shadow behind Victor Harwood, it is not Clara, nor Cavendish, nor Langston. There is another, one who moved, unseen, Mrs. Hargreaves, hovering nervously, mentioned a detail she had overlooked in the chaos. 'Sir,' she said, her voice hesitant, 'there was a visitor to the manor the week before Sir Reginald's death, a Mr. Percival Grey, a solicitor. He met Sir Reginald in private, and afterward the master was troubled.' Poirot's mustache twitched, his interest piqued. 'A solicitor, you say? And what was the nature of this meeting?' Mrs. Hargreaves shook her head. 'I don't know, sir, but he left a card, and Sir Reginald locked it in his desk.' Poirot opened the desk's hidden drawer, finding a small card embossed with Percival Grey, Solicitor, London. Tucked beside it was a folded document, sealed but unmarked. Breaking the seal, Poirot read silently, his expression growing grave. The document was a draft of a new will, dated October 10th, 1925, disinheriting Eleanor if she married Lawrence Cavendish, and redirecting the bulk of the estate to a charitable trust. A single line stood out: "To protect my legacy from those who would exploit it." "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low, "this is the unseen motive. Sir Reginald sought to protect his daughter, not from Victor's embezzlement alone, but from a marriage he deemed dangerous. The shadow is not a person, but an intention, a will that would have changed everything." He paused, his mind racing. Beatrice acted to save her brother, but someone else knew of this will and feared its consequences. Poirot requested a final gathering in the drawing room at 7:30 p.m., the guests assembling with weary reluctance. Eleanor, her eyes red-rimmed, sat beside Cavendish, whose face was a mask of controlled anger. Dr. Langston and Clara, their marriage strained but intact, sat in silence. Victor Harwood, though no longer accused of murder, bore the weight of his sister's sacrifice. Lady Margaret Dunley, her sharp gaze undimmed, watched Poirot with keen concerns about Cavendish's ambitions. "Did you know of this will?" Lady Margaret's lips curved slightly. "I suspected he was planning something drastic. He confided his fears about Lawrence's influence, but not the details." Poirot nodded, his mind fitting the final piece into place. "The will was the motive, but not for murder. Beatrice acted to protect Victor, unaware of this document, yet its existence explains Sir Reginald's urgency, his fear of betrayal." He addressed the room. The shadow was not a person, but a fear of losing control, of seeing his daughter bound to a man he distrusted. Sir Reginald's death was a tragedy of missteps, of secrets kept too long. The guests sat in stunned silence, the weight of the revelation settling over them. Eleanor rose, her voice breaking. "Father only wanted to protect me. I wish I'd known." As the gathering dispersed, Poirot confided in Hastings. "Mon ami, the case is truly closed now. The will clarifies the motive, but it does not change the guilt. Beatrice struck the blow, driven by loyalty, and the shadow of the will drove Sir Reginald to his fateful meeting." He adjusted his hat, preparing to leave,
The little grey cells have done their work, and justice prevails. By 8:30 p.m., Poirot and Hastings stood on the gravel drive, the Daimler waiting. The manor loomed behind them, its secrets laid bare. "Hastings," Poirot said, his voice soft, "the heart seeks to protect, but it can blind us to the truth. Let us leave this place, to its healing." With that, he stepped into the car, the engine humming as they left Greystone Manor behind, its echoes of truth fading into the twilight. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The twilight of October 15th, 1925, settled over Greystone Manor with a serene stillness, as if the estate itself exhaled after days of turmoil. Hercule Poirot, standing in the hall with his valise packed, prepared to depart, his work at the manor nearly complete. The revelation of Beatrice Harwood's guilt, Clara Langston's complicity, astute. Let us tie these final threads. Poirot had sent a telegram to London earlier that day, inquiring about Percival Gray. The response, delivered by a footman at 8:30 p.m., confirmed Gray as a reputable solicitor known for handling sensitive estate matters. The draft will, Poirot explained, was Sir Reginald's attempt to safeguard his legacy from Lawrence Cavendish's ambitions, which he feared were tied to Victor Harwood's financial schemes. "Your father," Poirot said gently, "wished to protect you without breaking your heart. He kept the will secret to avoid confronting you directly, hoping to resolve matters with Cavendish first." Eleanor nodded, her eyes glistening. "He always tried to shield me, even when it hurt him." Poirot inclined his head. "Oui, mademoiselle. His silence was his love, but it led to tragedy. The note to meet in the garden, written by Beatrice, was the spark, but the will was the shadow that drove his fears." To clarify the final details, Poirot revisited the study with Hastings at 9 p.m., examining the desk where the will had been found. A small ledger, overlooked in earlier searches, caught his eye. It contained a list of payments to P.G., Percival Gray, dated over the past month, suggesting Sir Reginald had been planning the change to his will for some time. "This," Poirot said, showing Hastings the ledger, "confirms Sir Reginald's determination. He suspected betrayal not only from Victor, but from someone closer, perhaps Cavendish, whose ambitions he misjudged." Hastings frowned. But Cavendish wasn't the killer. Could he have known about the will? Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. Cavendish's fault was ambition, not murder. The will's existence was known only to Sir Reginald and Gray, and perhaps Lady Margaret, who sensed his intentions. Beatrice acted to protect her brother, unaware of the will, but her act was the culmination of many secrets." To ensure no stone was left unturned, Poirot spoke briefly with Lady Margaret Dunley at 9:30 p.m. in the drawing room. "Madame," he asked, "you knew of Sir Reginald's fears. Did you suspect the will?" Lady Start. Victor Harwood, broken by his sister's sacrifice, faced financial ruin, but vowed to make amends. The manor, though scarred, was beginning to heal. Poirot, adjusting his hat, turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, the final threads are woven. The will, the payments to Gray, the shadow of betrayal. They complete the picture. Sir Reginald's death was a tragedy of trust misplaced, but the truth has set the stage for justice." Hastings, clutching his notebook, marveled at his friend's precision. "You've done it again, Poirot. Every detail accounted for." Poirot's smile was modest. "The little grey cells, Hastings. They demand order, and order they have found." As the Daimler pulled away, the manor's lights faded into the night, a monument to secrets unveiled. Poirot gazed out at the darkened downs, his mind already turning to new challenges.
leaving Greystone Manor to its quiet restoration under the stars. Chapter 15. The Quiet Departure. The night of October 15th, 1925, enveloped Greystone Manor in a velvet darkness, broken only by the soft glow of lanterns along the gravel drive. Hercule Poirot, his valise packed and his mind at ease, stood beside the waiting Daimler, ready to leave the estate that had been both stage and witness to a tragic drama. Captain Hastings, ever his steadfast companion, felt a bittersweet relief as he glanced back at the manor's ivy-clad walls, their secrets now laid bare. The case was closed, the truth revealed, but Poirot's final reflections promised to cast a lasting light on the human frailties exposed at Greystone. At 10:30 p.m., as the car's engine hummed softly, Poirot took a moment to address Eleanor Ashford, who had come to see them off. Her face, though still marked by grief, carried a quiet strength, as if the truth had fortified her resolve. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady, "you've given me the courage to face what comes next. Father's will, his fears, they were his way of protecting me. I'll honor that by choosing my own path." Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes warm with approval. "Mademoiselle."
Only the crime, but the why of it. Hastings, following close, ventured a question. "Poirot, what of the others? Cavendish, the Langstons, Lady Margaret, will they carry this with them?" Poirot's mustache twitched in a faint smile. "Each carries their own burden, Hastings. Monsieur Cavendish must face his ambition, perhaps tempered by Eleanor's choice. The Langstons, their marriage tested, will seek to mend what is broken. And Madame Dunley, she sees all, but chooses when to speak. They will move forward, as life demands." Poirot's thoughts turned to the broader tapestry of the case. The cufflink, a deliberate misdirection. The scuff mark, a clue to Beatrice's desperate act. The blood-stained handkerchief, a testament to Clara's fear. And the draft will, the unseen motive that had driven Sir Reginald to his fateful end. "The human heart," Poirot said, his voice low. "It seeks to protect, to conceal, to control. But the truth, it is relentless. It finds its way, as water finds the crack in the stone." As they returned to the Daimler, the manor's lights glowed faintly behind them, a beacon of order restored. Poirot climbed into the car, his expression serene. "Hastings," he said, as the vehicle began to move, "the world is a place of chaos, but with method, with observation, we bring harmony. This case, it reminds us, no secret can withstand the scrutiny of the little gray cells." The car rolled down the drive, the crunch of gravel fading into silence. Hastings looked back one last time, the manor receding into the night like a memory. "You've done it again, Poirot," he said, a note of awe in his voice. "Every piece in place, every question answered." Poirot's smile was modest, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Not every question, mon ami. The heart's deepest motives, those we can only glimpse. But for now, justice is served, and that is enough." As the Daimler carried them toward London, the stars emerged above